I'm Brandi Kruse. Coming up today on Undivided, as Washington State leads the nation in drug overdoses and trails the nation in business growth, leaders can't help but continue to focus on their radical priorities. Plus, taxpayers footing the bill for gender surgeries in our state prisons, and another Olympia School District mom blows the whistle on indoctrination. That and more coming up today on Undivided. Remember, you can support our show for just $5 a month by signing up at undividedpod.com. Hello and welcome to Undivided on this Monday. Thank you for being here. Thank you so much for your commitment to giving common sense a comeback. We need that commitment from you today. We have some headlines that have been out nationally that make Washington State look absolutely ridiculous. They're not going to come as a surprise to any of you. But certainly when you juxtapose the headlines that we're going to discuss on the show today with some of the other things that our leaders continue to focus on, you see how absurd it is that we continue to put the same people in office and we continue to let the same people squander our tax money on ridiculous things while life or death crises like homelessness, substance abuse, and crime just get worse and worse and worse and worse. So that's kind of the tale that we're going to thread today. We'll also have an update, speaking of just radical policies, on the Olympia School District. Yet another Olympia School District parent is joining us today to blow the whistle on the continued indoctrination within that school district. Despite the fact that we have exposed them time and time again, they have no shame. They're going to continue to do this until more parents come forward, there's more media attention, and more people push back. I want to start, though, with an exclusive from our friend Jason Rantz over at 770 KTDH, host of the Jason Rantz Show. And one of the reasons this just struck me, I guess there's two reasons. One, it's very timely. So on the national political stage, there is this conversation around Kamala Harris and who she used to be versus who she's claiming to be now, and these old clips as she's claiming to be like this moderate, these old clips surfacing of her supporting things like taxpayer-funded gender surgeries for inmates.
When I was Attorney General, I learned that the California Department of Corrections, which was a client of mine, I didn't get to choose my clients.
Right, a client of the Attorney General.
A client of the Attorney General, right. Of the Office of Attorney General, that they were standing in the way of surgery.
For prisoners.
For prisoners. And there was a specific case. And when I learned about the case, I worked behind the scenes to not only make sure that that transgender woman got the services she was deserving. So it wasn't only about that case. I made sure that they changed the policy in the state of California so that every transgender inmate in the prison system would have access to the medical care that they desired and need.
Okay, so that's just nutso, right? And I think most people understand that's just insane. You're going to spend the money we work hard for that the government takes from us through taxes on giving inmates, regardless of the crime they commit, transgender surgeries that they desire and that they need, according to Kamala Harris. So that was getting a lot of attention. And we know that we've covered it a ton, that Washington State allows biological men to say, I'm transgender, and to be housed behind lock and key with women. There's been quite a bit of coverage on this show and elsewhere in the national press, like National Review, but local media is just like, I'm not touching that. So there's this certainly, timely connection between what we're going to discuss and Jason's story and the Kamala Harris thing and her getting heat over what she said and supported, and also just this real twisted priorities that we have in the state of Washington while we deal with all these other crises. So Jason Rantz published a story. You can read it at mynorthwest.com. It says hundreds of thousands of dollars spent on gender reassignment surgeries on transgender inmates. It's a great article that he got some useful information via public disclosure, but one of the things that struck me about it is this is really hard information to get. As you guys know, the state of Washington, because of a law that was passed by Democrats, shields a lot of information on transgender inmates. They'll deny public records requests. They say basically this is protected health information, so we're not allowed to know who's transgender, who's a man in a woman's prison, what they've done, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I was kind of shocked that Jason, I texted him this morning, was able to get the actual data and cost analysis of how much the Department of Corrections in our state has spent on gender-related care what kind of care specifically, and in at least one instance, who's getting it. So he put out this, he has the actual like graph that was given to him by DOC, and he said, I said, how'd you get this? He said, through a public records request. He said it just took a lot of time for them to cough it up. But in this, so basically it's more than $500,000 that's been spent total on gender-related care for inmates within Washington State's prison system. And it kind of breaks it down by what facility they're at. I mean, it won't tell you personal data, right, on the inmate. So it just says, just generally, here's how much we spend. Medicaid's, covered part of it. And it gets into, you should definitely read the article, but it gets into what types of, surgeries and care, et cetera, was given to these inmates. But more than $500,000 so far on, it says through June 2024, some of the costs were covered by Medicare, $592,577.67 to cover gender care for 44 inmates across 9 of the state's 11 prison facilities. So when I look at that, I just think on its face, that's ridiculous. Like, we work incredibly hard for the money that the state takes from us in taxes, and to know that even a penny of it is going to help people get gender transition surgeries who are currently incarcerated is nutso. It's totally bananas. It shows just these whacked priorities and this extreme agenda that they continue to push. But as I was reading some of the details on it, one of the things I find even crazier about it is, for instance, they don't factor into or care how long an inmate might be incarcerated. So they're willing to pay with our money for some sort of transitional surgery for an inmate who might get out next year. Or, and I don't know what's worse. Is it weirder to pay for the transitional surgery of an inmate who might only have one more year in DOC, or for an inmate who's going to be there for the rest of their lives? Which one is crazier? Because in one instance, and this is the only reason that we know this name is because this person has been very public. They're currently incarcerated for murder, a double murder of their parents. But they have like someone handling a blog for them on the outside. So they put all their business out there. The state won't put their business out there and their name out there, but they willingly put all their business out there. Brian Kim is his name. We've discussed on the show before. Biological man, I think now goes by some other name. Amber Rose Kim or something. Anyway, you killed 2 people. I'm using your God-given name, your legal name. Brian Kim stabbed his dad, strangled his mom to death when he was 19 years old, sentenced to life in prison without parole. And you may recall this story because he had gone on like a hunger strike because he got transferred, was in the women's prison, got caught having sex, which there is no consensual sex in prison, with a female inmate. So they actually, for the first time ever, sent a trans inmate back to a man's prison. That was Brian Kim, where he went on a hunger strike because he was so mad that he got kicked out of the women's prison. But according to Jason Rantz, ended up ending his hunger strike in part because if he continued it, he risked not getting transgender bottom surgery, which he so desperately wanted, courtesy of the taxpayers of the state of Washington. So, like, we're paying for, think about this. Think of how hard you work. Think of how much money the government takes from you in taxes. And think about the fact that some of your tax money is going to be used to give a double murderer who strangled his mom to death and stabbed his dad bottom surgery so they can live out the rest of their life in the penitentiary as a quote-unquote woman. That has to be a 99% issue. That has to be. If every Washingtonian could cast a secret ballot on do you agree with this or not, I guarantee that would be a 99% issue. Hell, I guarantee even most of the Democratic lawmakers in Olympia would say, I don't support that. But publicly, they have to pretend that they do. Publicly, they have to pretend that this is somehow just and normal, a good use of money. It's insane. It's an insane thing to spend people's hard-earned tax money on. And, I'm so grateful that Jason was able to get this data because, again, I mean, they've sent cease and desist to the media who ask about anything related to transgender inmates, but to know that they're spending that much money on this type of gender care, which, they're going to argue, well, it's, we provide other care to inmates once they're in, the care of the DOC, we have to give them things. And if they don't do this, they might commit suicide or whatever it is. Like, forgive me if I don't feel bad for a double murderer who wants to be a woman and be in the woman's prison and whether they can get bottom surgery. Does that make me a bad person? No, it doesn't. And I refuse to have anyone convince me that it does. So that's going on. And I just wanted to, because we're going to lay out some just whacked things that are happening in the state of Washington while there are very serious issues at hand that are not getting addressed whatsoever. So one of them obviously has to do with education. So we aired last week, we debuted our first ever documentary, Operation Indoctrination, a story of academic decline, where we, through the stories of current and former students of the Olympia School District, exposed some of the absolutely insane social and political indoctrination being pushed on kids within that district. And it's not just relegated to one or two rogue teachers. It really is, from the school board on down, a dictate that, hey, this is how we're going to run our district. This is how we're going to run our classrooms. And it's totally okay for teachers to push their agenda on kids. So since that aired, we've had a couple follow-ups. We had one last week. We spoke to the mother of the twin 7th graders who were featured in the documentary. And she was on with us last week and basically said they haven't even learned their lesson because one of the first days her kids were back in the Olympia School District, there was this lesson she found out about, not because she was notified as a parent, but because she was looking at, online sort of what the curriculum was going to be. And there was this banned book lesson where literally banned books, you gotta believe that they're banned for some reason. So she told us how she requested the information and kids were being given these little playing cards that on one side had a banned book cover and on the back side talked about why the book was banned. And it was things like Gender Queer by Maya Kobabe, Two Boys Kissing by David Lithin. So it's like, oh, we're not going to actually have you read these books, but we'll hand out playing cards for you to take home so you know what the book is and you know what the book is about. So we might as well have just made you read it anyway because we're trying to indoctrinate you by helping you learn about books like Two Boys Kissing and Gender Queer. So that happened, and it was just proof that, like, the Olympia School District genuinely doesn't care. They genuinely don't care that they get all this national attention and pushback about teachers forcing their agenda and extreme gender ideology on students. So anyway, that happened, and one of the things we always say is more people need to speak out. We need more parents coming forward, blowing the whistle on these things and making it very damn clear that it's not acceptable to them. So today we have another Olympia School District parent who is upset by something that just this school year, in the beginning of the school year, she found out was being taught to her kids. So she was looking again proactively through her child's fourth grader, right, Nicole? Fourth grader, okay? Through her child's, the upcoming agenda for classes. So this is what she saw. September 23rd through 27th. So it has, some things, Teacher's Corner, upcoming dates, things we're going to be doing. It says this week, fluency assessments, math unit, sentences and paragraphs, and then identity unit. Identity unit. So the mom was like, what the hell is an identity unit? And she's already, mom's spidey senses like, identity unit, huh? So she proactively reaches out and gets some more information. What the heck is an identity unit? Because again, remember, under 2081, the Parental Bill of Rights, parents are supposed to be notified about any lessons proactively that involve controversial things like gender ideology. So they have ample opportunity to either address it with their child before they go to class, so they know what they're getting into, or to opt their child out. So this parent is already annoyed because it's like, here she sees, here's what's happening in class this week. There's an identity unit. She hasn't been told anything about it. She has to proactively reach out to the school and ask them. So she gets this little descriptor of what it is. So the teacher's name is Emily Hamilton, fourth grade teacher in the Olympia School District. And it says identity year start lessons. So this is the identity unit. And it's got some out loud reading. And then it says activities lessons, rainbow name acronyms, pronouns, celebrating names, identities and characteristics, adopted from equality human rights, identity flowers, and a final project, identity posters. So the mom's like, for the love of God, does my child have to do this? So she calls the school, decides you should have told me about this. My fourth grade son, again, fourth grade, is not going to be participating in this. But Alvina also was nice enough to join us to talk about really her frustration with all of this and how this all went down from her perspective. Again, this fourth grade boy's mother. Alvina, welcome to unDivided.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so how many kids do you have in the Olympia School District?
I currently have 3 kids. I have a 4th grader, a 2nd grader, and a preschooler.
How's it going? Are you happy with OSD?
Not exactly, no.
What's wrong with it? As if I have to ask, but yeah, go ahead.
So just this last Monday, I received a weekly update email from my 4th grader's teacher, Mix Hamilton at McLean Elementary School. And these emails come every Monday. Yeah.
Mix is their first name?
That's their title. Instead of Mr. or Mrs., it's Mix.
Okay. All right.
And so we received the weekly email update listing what they'd be going through for the week, lesson wise. And at the end, I noticed it said identity unit. And in my own mind, I kind of already knew what that was going to refer to, but I did a quick Google search just to make sure before I emailed them back. And it has to do with pronouns and gender identity and all of that. So I did email the teacher and asked, what is this unit about? She responded that it was to teach them about pronouns, allow them to identify what gender or other garbage they want to be, and that if my son wanted to opt out of it, he could. So I went ahead and emailed the principal about it, telling them that I did want to opt out, that we don't believe in filling children's minds with this stuff at this young of an age.
Yeah, so MX, and I was just looking, so the teachers identifies as they, them, so clearly pronouns are important to this teacher. So is this a teacher that you've had concerns about in the past?
So we're still, I would say, fairly new to McLean. We had homeschooled for about 2 years and had to make the very difficult decision to place my son into public school, because of disabilities, with ADHD and possibly autism, and it wasn't working for him to be at home anymore. So I knew she was there. And I was very apprehensive, knowing he was going to be going into the 4th grade, that would be the teacher that he received possibly. But I didn't know much about them to really make a judgment or a decision. So I was giving the benefit of the doubt when we received teacher assignments. They seemed very welcoming when we went to the back to school night. There wasn't any red flags that were going up at that point.
Yeah.
Until just this week.
Well, because I think, an adult being transgender is one thing. And I'm not really laughing at that. I'm laughing at the ridiculousness of, a 4th grader has an identity course and it happens to be with a teacher who identifies as they, them. It's like, okay, of course. But it's how that translates to kids, and if it's forced on kids, which is obviously the issue. So first of all, my understanding of the voter-backed initiative says that if there are lessons of this nature, that parents need to be notified about them so they have ample opportunity to opt out.
Yes.
Were you ever, is the only reason you knew about it because you happened to see it?
Yes, I did not receive any kind of email notification, written, verbal, any other way, until I received the weekly update and then emailed the teacher directly. And had I not emailed them, I wouldn't have known, probably like many other parents who probably just glance at that email and are like, okay, whatever, but there was no prior notification.
Yeah, and has that been explained to you? Because I have read the communication you had with the school. Have you had any other communication where they've explained why you weren't notified about it?
No.
Okay. Are you planning to ask them about that?
Yes.
Yeah. So this lesson, I'm now seeing the kind of name, identity, year start lessons where it kind of goes through a couple reading exercises. It has a unit opener, rainbow name acronyms, pronouns, celebrating names, identities and characteristics, identity flowers, and a final project of identity posters. Okay. So your child will not be participating in any of that.
No, they have been dismissing him from class to go into a quiet room. Is what he calls it, during that lesson time where he's allowed to play a game on the computer.
Are you worried about what that might mean for your child? I mean, in fourth grade, I'm just thinking if they got to be taken out of the room while the class does other activities like making posters and things like that, that it might make him seem like an outcast.
I have asked him, has anybody explained to you why you're being taken out of the class? And he says no. And I asked him if any of his classmates have asked, and thankfully, no, they haven't. But that would be a concern, coming from a child's standpoint of, I don't think it's right that he hasn't been told why he's being removed from the room. And he's also missing out on valuable academic time to cover an agenda-based curriculum.
And that's the point, right? Which is like, a kid can opt out, but you shouldn't have to opt your kid out because this shouldn't be a lesson. You hit it right on the head, which is this lesson is taking time for academics in a school district where test scores are not great. So as a parent, I mean, you homeschooled, you're saying that for this particular child of yours, homeschooling just is not an option.
No.
Yeah. What about private school?
No. We are a one-income family. We can't afford that, just like probably 90% of the other families. We struggle month to month just to pay our necessary bills and put food on the table and keep a roof over their heads. And when I've posted on social media before about topics, I get responses like, well, maybe the public school system isn't for you. You should move your kids to private school, or maybe you should just move out of this state. The state isn't the right state for you to live in. Well, if it was that simple, I would move out of this state.
That's insane. And so it really is kind of this, I imagine that's a feeling of being trapped. Yeah. What would your message be to the district about, I mean, I know you've communicated with them directly, but just, we just aired a special on some of the things that have been pervasive within the Olympia School District, and they seem to just not be waking up to this reality. So what would you say to the district about, as a parent, your concerns with lessons like these?
My concern specifically for my son is he is already behind academically. And now you are pushing this agenda where you're taking subjects away. Like, there's no science even in school. They focus on math and reading and social emotional learning. He's not receiving the education he deserves or needs. We aren't in a position to put him into private school. And it is my firm belief that these are my children that God has entrusted to me. God did not entrust these children to the school board or the school district to decide what is in their best interest. And they have been born with their God-given genders, and nobody has the right, besides my husband and I, to discuss those things with them.
Are you worried that, and you know your son better than us, obviously, could he be influenced by a lesson like that talks about different gender identities?
I would say in his case, thankfully, no, because he has a very strong family unit of grandparents and parents who have made it very clear to him that he is a boy And nobody can change that. No surgery can change that. No medications can change that. He was born as a boy.
Amen. Amen, Elvina. I want to be part of your family. I would ask you, if we had school choice in this state where, or even vouchers where your tax dollars that you're spending on the public education system were made available to you and your family to educate your kids as you saw fit, what would your choice be with your son?
We would choose private school for him. Mm-hmm.
Pretty much a no-brainer, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Well, we appreciate you speaking out about this. Any concerns on your part about talking about it publicly?
I'm sure that there's going to be people that even I know that see this and will not like what I have to say. I've already faced that last year with the Black Lives Matter movement. My kids are in Cub Scouts, and I spoke up on the district Facebook page saying that my kids wouldn't be participating, and we lost a scout because his mother was a teacher at a local school and didn't agree with me and didn't want to align herself with people that didn't share her same views. But I am in my 40s and I don't care what people think of me anymore. What matters most to me is what my children think of me, what my family thinks of me, and what God thinks of me.
Yeah, and I imagine that when you guys are doing your scout thing, you don't ask the kids, what are your parents' political views,
no,
whether we're going to accept you.
We do not bring politics or religion into our meetings or our lessons at all.
Yeah.
We are welcoming of all, identities and religions. We welcome people. We don't judge people. That's not our place. But we also aren't going to allow people to indoctrinate our children with their agendas.
Amen. Well, Elvina, thank you so much for bringing this to our attention. Welcome. And please update us if there's any developments, okay?
I will. Thank you.
Love it. We need more parents like Elvina Ross. We absolutely like Jake McCullough. And man, I love what she says. Like, I'm 40. I don't care what anybody thinks of me. It's like, that's what we need, right? And also understanding you're on the right side of this. There's no reason in the world that fourth graders need to start the school year with a lesson on pronouns and making posters that display, different types of pronouns and who you are and how you identify in the fourth grade. That's ridiculous. That's, honestly, it should be criminal. It's insane. And you've got a teacher that identifies as they, them, which now you're forcing. And I even have, frankly, I'm done. I have a problem with that too. I'm not doing it anymore. Like, I used to be much more like, hey, if you're an adult, you do you, and I'll call you how you want to call it. You're a teacher. And you're having your kids refer to you as MX Hamilton, Mix Hamilton. And then you are going to invariably explain to them that means you're neither a boy nor a girl, you're a they, them, which isn't a thing. And you're doing that to fourth graders. And you're confusing the hell out of them. And no wonder why we have more and more kids who are identifying as transgender, because they're being indoctrinated from such an early age. And then you've got parents who, if they weren't absolutely laser focused on every single email that came out from that school, they wouldn't know that her fourth grade son was being sent to class and he was having a whole lesson plan and activities in the fourth grade on pronouns, celebrating names, rainbow name acronyms, identities and characteristics, identity posters, identity flowers. This is mental. The Olympia School District should absolutely be ashamed of itself. And again, this is post scrutiny. They've been under scrutiny for a long time. Our documentary was just sort of the collection of all of these stories that have been done about them. And yet, even the seventh graders featured in the documentary, they go to school and they're getting these, they have an assignment where they're getting banned book playing cards about gender queer and two boys kissing. That school doesn't give a you know what? They don't care until more people speak out. Like this mom, Elvina Ross, who, and you have to feel for these parents, they would rather send their kids anywhere else. They would rather send their kids to a private school. But that's not an option for them. And so they are genuinely trapped. And that's why it's so important that we expose and push back against this radical ideology being pushed on kids. So now I want you to keep all of that in mind as we discuss two headlines that came out, national headlines, that make our state look absolutely ridiculous. So here we are focusing on things like transgender surgeries for inmates, teaching pronouns to school students, doing all these other things that are completely a departure from what the government should ever be focused on doing. And meanwhile, Washington State comes out this year, or Washington State came out this past week, that it's leading the nation in overdoses and it is trailing the nation in business growth. Gee, I wonder why. This segment is brought to you in partnership with our friends at Future 42. Turn your frustration into action at future42.org. All right, let's start with this article from Axios. The headline, overdose deaths rose in Washington as they fell nationwide. So sort of a top line statistic here. Between May 2023 and April 2024, Washington saw nearly 3,600 overdose deaths. Think about that. Through a 1 year period of time, 3,600 people in our state died of overdose deaths. It's a 14% increase over the previous 12 months, according to the CDC, while nationwide, overdose deaths fell by 10% over the same time frame. So across the country, overdoses are down 10% on average. In Washington State, up 14%. Last year alone, during this time frame, we lost 3,600 Washingtonians to overdoses. That's insane. Sometimes I hear this statistic compared to like how many, passenger jets crashing would that, be akin to. And it's like if we had one passenger jet that crashed in our state and killed like 300 people, it would be wall to wall to wall to wall news. Yet we've got the equivalent of full passenger jets crashing like every freaking month. And it's like, no, let's keep doing the same thing. No changes needed. Everything's fine here. So we're leading the nation when it comes to overdose deaths. And what I found interesting is, look, Axios, sometimes the way it does its articles, like it's just giving you the stats and the top line statistics, but sometimes, and in this case, what I don't like about the way they cover stories is they refuse to attribute it to what's really going on. Like they're like, oh, this is just top line stats, and then we'll quote like a CDC person or a health person on what they say is going on. And the media won't take it a step further and do their jobs to hold powerful people accountable by saying, actually, here's what's happening. Like we have all these policies and that's probably, contributing to it in some meaningful way. For instance, we had 2 years during this time frame where we de facto legalized hard drugs. So we weren't arresting anyone for using hard drugs. And that probably made the problem worse, as they saw in Oregon. No, can't do any of that. It says, in King County, and it's trying to give like a positive spin on this, in King County, overdose deaths were down in the first half of this year, the county health agency told Axios. Oh my gosh, that's great. Okay. So we had over that period of time, 14% increase. But in the first half of this year, King County Health is saying that actually overdose deaths are down. It says in the first 6 months of 2024, Public Health Seattle King County distributed 54,000 kits containing the overdose reversing medication naloxone, far more than the 30,000 distributed in 2023. And the 13,000 distributed in 2022. Each kit contains 2 doses of the drug commonly known as Narcan. So that's why in the first 6 months of the year, overdose deaths are down, because you've distributed 54,000 kits, each of them containing 2 doses of Narcan. So we're not making people better. That's not why overdoses are trending down in the first 6 months of this year, despite last year them being up 14%, while everywhere else in the nation, mostly they're on the decline. So you want to say, well, oh, wow, but in the first 6 months of the year, we're turning this thing around, fewer overdose deaths. It's because you're giving people a drug that temporarily saves their lives so they live another day to try to kill themselves again. And we're supposed to be happy about that, be proud about that. Look, I'm glad they're not dying, right? But we have no system in place. You hand those kits out and you've got somebody, they revive someone on the street, or they, revive a friend they're doing drugs with, or whatever it is. They pop back to life and they just keep doing fentanyl. It's not like there's some mandate for treatment, as we'll talk about later on in the show. It's not like there's some mandate that, hey, we give you this kit, but we need you to go to treatment. No, it's just like, hey, you're doing fentanyl? Cool. Like, you keep doing it. Here's a couple doses of drugs. They'll bring you right back to life if you OD on it, and you can keep using. Then when you go through both those, come on back, and we'll give you more. And every time that you're unconscious for a minute or whatever it is, you're getting more brain dead and more brain dead and more brain dead. And we're supposed to act as if like this is an absolute success. Overdose deaths are down. No, you've just prolonged their suffering, and until you intervene, and unless you intervene, they're still going to die. They're just probably going to die in a couple months. So that headline, and then there was another headline that came out nationally that, again, makes us look ridiculous. And I think what's interesting about this one is it is from a progressive institute, and it was pushed out there. Again, it's a national story, so the focus wasn't on Washington State, but it's from a progressive institute that did this. You can tell by reading the article, because they wanted to make a point that, like, oh, the economy is just humming right along under Biden-Harris, right? So keep in mind, that's the point of this. Like, we're painting a national picture through this data of an economy that's in very good shape because, as they say, entrepreneurship, startups, and business formation are booming across the U.S. It's from the Center for American Progress. So they put out this map, right? And it says the number of businesses grew in 85% of counties. So across the country from 2019 to 2023, if you're watching the show, all those blue areas, and the deeper the blue, the more businesses are growing. New businesses, et cetera, entrepreneurship. But then on the map, you notice this little wee state up in the upper left-hand corner that's pretty solid orange. An outlier, certainly, among all the other states in the union, save for maybe Alaska. And you notice when you look at the graph that Washington State is doing the exact opposite as the rest of the country is. That in Washington State, business growth is way, way down during a period where the rest of the country, most of the rest of the country, even freaking California and Oregon, seem to be doing great when it comes to new businesses. So if we zoom in a little bit, I just want to show you kind of what some of this looks like. Nicole, do you have the close-up of this? Because you can hover over each of the individual counties and you can actually see in real-time close-ups of how many businesses and the percentage of businesses that have been lost in all of those counties. So you don't have it?
Wow. Are you talking about video?
Yeah. Oh, okay, thanks. Thank you. So King County, minus 5,000. Snohomish County, minus 800. Pierce County, minus 2,300. Talking about 10% decline. Even you go further east, Yakima's even worse, 22% decline in the number of businesses. Grant County, 18% decline. Adams County, 22%. Spokane, down 6%. So we have every county in the state. There's not one county, except there's one in the upper left. It must be one of the island counties that has had a slight increase in the number of businesses. But for other counties, businesses have truly suffered. And I think there's a variety of reasons for that, right? We had some of the strictest lockdowns of any state in the nation. But what else did we do during that time period? We passed a tax on capital gains. And what have we been saying about a tax on capital gains? Well, why would any entrepreneur come here? Why would anyone start a business here when that's a brand new tax that you've laid out? They're saying, well, gosh, if my business becomes really successful or whatever it is, I'm going to pay a lot out of pocket in capital gains. And then you combine that with the homeless crisis, the situation going on in the downtown cores with drug abuse. I mean, we heard from a restaurant owner in Spokane closing their business because of concerns over drug use and crime outside. It's a very anti-business atmosphere here. And again, progressives can't argue with this. It's from a progressive institute. It's from the Center for American Progress. And they're literally doing it as a story bragging about business growth across the country. And then what's also funny is when you look at the large graph, it's like some of the reddest states, like Florida, you look at Idaho, Montana, things are going great. And it's a progressive institute bragging about this. Then you look at one of the most progressive states in the union, and business growth here is absolutely in the gutter. I want to read you just this paragraph from it. It says, evidence since 2021 suggests that these troubling signs have reversed themselves and that we are in the midst of a startup boom. This boom in business formation could be meaningful for local economies. More new businesses can lead to more job creation, faster productivity growth, and stronger wage growth. New businesses can also increase competition and decrease corporate concentration, boosting wages and reducing prices. So think about that for a second. Again, from a progressive institute like this is great. When we have all these new businesses, 85% of counties across the country have this staggering new business growth, and that can help decrease corporate concentration, boost wages, and reduce prices. Isn't that the stuff that like Washington officials talk about all the time? Like, oh, anti-big business, anti-corporations, we need higher wages. Yet all of their policies are leading to the exact opposite outcome that other areas are seeing, because we have a major decline in new business growth. And so, yeah, then you want to complain about, oh, corporate consolidation, corporate concentration, oh, wages aren't as high as they should be, etc. Well, you haven't created an environment that fosters higher wages. You haven't created an environment that fosters competition and reduces corporate consolidation. And this makes it very clear. So you have these two back-to-back headlines nationally that when you look and think about all the things that our state, is focused on, well, overdoses are up, rest of the country is doing much better, business growth is down, rest of the country is doing much better. You have to look at that and wonder, okay, well, do we keep doing the same thing that we've been doing, or do we go a different direction? Do we do things that are actually more positive for businesses? Do we actually take meaningful efforts to address the fentanyl crisis, the drug crisis, the crime crisis? Because they're all tied together. You can't bifurcate these two things. You can't bifurcate the drug crisis we have with the declining business environment, because they're connected. You have businesses in that used to be some of the most economically vibrant areas of our state that don't want to be there because of the drug crisis, which fuels the homeless crisis, which fuels the crime crisis. And so in order to fix the business climate, we have to fix the crime crisis, we have to fix the drug climate. And if you fail to do that, then you're going to fail to help our state economically. So it's just embarrassing when I see all these other issues that our state is focused on. Well, it's getting the fundamental things absolutely wrong. That segment is brought to you in partnership with our friends over at Future 42. Turn your frustration into action at future42.org. All right, coming up next, speaking of doing the basic things wrong, so the drug crisis is out of control. Our friend Andrea Suarez, who's running for state house in the 43rd district, got her hands on one of those quote-unquote harm reduction kits. She makes some really good points about it, so we're going to play a video she put out coming up next. First, Natchez RV Resort Phase 2 is open, and you can reserve your private showing for this weekend, October 5th and 6th. They've got those turnkey park models that you can go see if you don't have an RV, but they also have 12 extra large RV lots available, starting at just $89.9. And man, they've got so much going on out there. So whether you choose to do a park model or pull up your RV, they just opened their 4,300 square foot beautiful clubhouse, ton of space for entertaining, gourmet kitchen, indoor-outdoor fireplace. They're just finishing up their pool and hot tub. They've got pickleball courts, tennis courts. There's miles of recreational trails around there, 300 days of sunshine, just a ton to do. So schedule your private showing for this weekend. You can go to NatchezRVResort.com, NatchezRVResort.com. Okay, the left calls them harm reduction kits, but Andrea Suarez has a different name for them that I think is much more appropriate. Let's talk about it in our segment, Unbelievable. Boop. All right, so Andrea Suarez, founder of We Heart Seattle, she's running for state house in the 43rd legislative district, one of the most progressive, if not the most progressive legislative districts in the entire state, and she's running against a bona fide socialist, Sean Scott. Now, I was a little worried about Andrea before the primary because she was sort of trying to act like out progressive Sean Scott, because she's like, what do I do to appeal to this voting base? And I was like, she just needs to be herself. She needs to do what she's always done, which is point out the failure of the homeless industrial complex, the failure of us to make any meaningful progress on substance abuse, crime, and homelessness. So post-primary, it seems like she's leaned into that and started returning to, what really made her popular in the first place is just her no BS approach to these things. So she put out this ad. I want to play most of it for you. Where she went to one of these, harm reduction, taxpayer-funded places and got one of their kits in Belltown, in the district that she wants to represent. Here's the video.
I picked up this suicide kit funded by our taxpayer dollars, known as Needle Exchange. It's really a needle dispensary, but there's not really needles anymore because nobody's using needles. They're using foil to smoke fentanyl. The number one cause of death in the United States of America is overdose deaths between the ages of 18 and 45. We have foil. We have instructions on how to roll foil into pipes. We have tourniquets, not even relevant anymore, so that's definitely a waste of taxpayer dollars. We have cookers. And oh, that wasn't good enough. We had to create cookers with a little pinky ring so you couldn't burn yourself. So this is harm reduction. I call this drug enablement. This is being paid for by our taxpayer dollars. When I'm elected as your state house representative, I will defund these suicide kits. This is cruel. We're giving these out to teenagers. We're giving these out to first-time users. Sadly, in this kit that I picked up at the King County Needle Dispensary, there was nothing in this package that offered access to treatment. We need a culture that makes it hard to get high and easy to get clean.
Yeah, amen. And having her actually walk us through that is fascinating to me because, you know, when this first idea of kind of harm reduction came out, it was more so like the needle exchanges, as she said. But now she said there's not even needles in there because that's not really how people are abusing fentanyl. And the idea behind a needle exchange was so you wouldn't transmit other diseases by using dirty needles or sharing needles, etc. And I think that there was some legitimacy to that. I mean, I definitely believe it goes too far and it's not harm reduction if you're helping people continue to use deadly drugs and you're not actually connecting them to treatment. But when you think about that, so like the idea of if it is just a needle exchange, like I'm doing this anyway, I'm going to turn my dirty needle into the thing and I'm going to get clean needles, then I'm not going to spread all these other like viruses around, right? But think about, again, the things that are in this kit now. Needle's not even in there. So think of the idea behind like a needle exchange and harm reduction and what it's translated into now. So again, she showed the foil. So think of how many, like this is taxpayer money, how much time went into, I'm going to put this little square of foil in this little plastic Ziploc container with plastic. We can't even use plastic straws. You're putting individual pieces of foil in a little plastic baggie. And then it has this actual instructional thing on how to fold your foil, right? To use your drugs with it. Now, what aspect of that is harm reduction, okay? Because think again of the example I gave you with a needle exchange, where there's a purpose for it at least, where if you use a dirty needle, you could be, spreading other diseases. So there's a public health benefit to it. What's the public health benefit or the risk of using a dirty piece of tinfoil? There is none. So this is just about giving people the tool they need to use a drug. There is no harm reduction element to that whatsoever. And the only thing in there that I could think about or see that was actually like had an element of reducing harm was that stupid little cooker with the thumb ring on it. Because the only harm reduction that gives you is you won't burn your finger. But again, like it's not a societal problem if you burn your finger. It is a societal problem if you're spreading communicable diseases via dirty needles. That's the only element in that whole bag that had any like even vague, like remote element of harm reduction. Think of how crazy that is. And again, the real kicker, I just want to replay again the end of her video here.
I picked up this suicide kit funded by our taxpayer dollars, known as needle exchange. It's really a needle dispensary, but there's not really needles anymore because nobody's using needles. They're using foil to smoke.
Can you play the other one? Is there no access to treatment in there? Hold on. Sorry.
Sadly, in this kit that I picked up at the King County Needle Dispensary, there was nothing in this package that offered access to treatment.
Yeah, nothing in the package that offered access to treatment. Not even like flyers or anything like that. Like, hey, here's your harm reduction kit, but also like, here's all the places you could go to get help. And there's no mandate for it, right? There's nothing saying you absolutely have to, like, if you want this, then you need to come in and do X, Y, Z, or meet with a therapist or meet with a social worker or something like that. So it truly is, as she said, it's a suicide kit. Think how disgusting that is. How psycho do you have to be to continue to support that, let alone support it with our taxpayer funds? You're paying for that. You're paying for them to put little square pieces of tinfoil in a plastic baggie and hand deliver it to someone who's going to use fentanyl that could kill them in one shot. You're paying for them to put little rings on the cookers so that the people cooking the drugs that are going to kill them don't burn their fingers. It's like if they take that drug, the least of their concerns is going to be if they burn their fingers because they'll probably just die. And we wonder why, when the rest of the nation has declining overdose rates, ours are up 14%. because we're giving them the tools they need to do these things. We're not arresting them on the streets. We don't even have enough officers, frankly, to arrest them, even if we wanted to. And even if they're arrested, as Cairo News showed us in a report, they'll get arrested, they won't get booked, and they'll be back out on the same street corner abusing fentanyl 5 hours later. Fundamentally broken. I asked you guys in our daily subscriber show poll, because what do you do, right? Because I'm not opposed to Narcan. There was no Narcan in these kids as far as we saw. I'm not opposed to it. I don't think people should just die if there's something that could easily bring them back to life. But the answer cannot be, as we see so often, law enforcement respond, they bring someone back to life with Narcan, and the person doesn't want to be transported to the hospital. In fact, oftentimes they're upset because you ruined their high, so they go back out and try to get high again. There's no intervention. If it was Narcan but intervention, it's a different scenario altogether. So I asked you in our daily subscriber show poll on Patreon, Locals, and X, what do you believe should happen after first responders reverse a drug overdose with Narcan? Nothing? Mandatory arrest? Mandatory treatment? Or an offer of treatment? And so, for me, the answer there is mandatory treatment. I think we really have to get back to, these laws changed decades ago where it was we don't want somebody to be able to just throw granny in an old folks home without any sort of due process. That's not what we're talking about here. But if you're using a deadly drug on the street, you are very clearly a risk to yourself. Probably a risk to others, but you're very clearly a risk to yourself. So I would vote for mandatory treatment on the spot if we bring you back to life after a deadly overdose. A lot of you saying the same, although there are some who favor mandatory arrest. Bill Swick said Croatia does not have public drug or mental illness issues. If someone has a mental episode or a drug issue, they are mandated to treatment. Of course, their government is much different than ours. E says, we allow assisted suicide, yet we want to Narcan and save addicts. I've known a lot of addicts, 100% of whom are dead now, and this may be harsh. Does it ever occur to anyone that addicts don't actually care if they die, that it may just be what they want to happen? And look, I know there's a school of thought on that, but I have met people who have been in the depths of addiction, who were saved with Narcan and or arrest. In one instance, it was somebody who had been arrested enough times, had enough time, this is years ago now, in a jail cell to sober up and make a better decision about their life. And that person went on, got married, had a healthy baby, and last I heard was a productive member of society. So I think that saving someone's life is worth it, but not if you're just throwing them back to the streets to do it all over again. You're going to get brain dead from that to the point where, you're not breathing, et cetera, where you're not even going to be able to function after that happens 3 or 4 times. So is that cold? I don't know. Mike Berta says mandatory treatment is a humane way to deal with this based on options given by Brandi. Thank you, Mike, for choosing amongst the options given by me. Nicole from Enumclaw, I chose offered treatment as much as I would like to see it be mandatory. Any of us that have struggled with a family or friend with addiction know that until they want help themselves, until they're ready to admit they're powerless over the disease, there is no forcing solutions. That being said, there can definitely be boundaries and consequences. Ed Graddon says the hospital system is already overloaded. Taking them there to sit for hours for nothing is a waste. Health One needs to offer what resources they can and move on. Yeah, and I understand that. We're talking about a perfect scenario, right? None of this is perfect, but our hospital system is overloaded. A lot of that, frankly, has to do with drug abuse and mental illness. And so you would have to have somewhere you could take them. I think that would have to be separate from the traditional hospital system. Like, hey, you're going into treatment today. That's the bottom line. It's a different treatment facility that's designed for people who, get taken off the street because they had to be overdosed with Narcan. But, this is a societal drain. And it is a societal drain for a lot of reasons. It's contributing to the decline of our cities. It's contributing to the decline of our society. It is absolutely sucking taxpayer resources and funds to no avail. It's not any better. The situation is not getting any better. And then you've got Axios saying, well, technically, fewer people died in the first 6 months of the year, and that's because they handed out 54,000 kits with Narcan doses. It's wait, fewer people died because you gave them a drug that brought them back to life. You didn't actually help them better their circumstances. Mike H., arrest them, then offer the carrot of treatment or the stick of conviction of a crime. And I understand that as well. Sometimes sobriety in a jail cell is what it takes for someone to be in the state of mind to accept services. I don't want to say anyone, 99.9999% of people who are high out of their minds and enjoying that ride that it's giving them are not going to say, yeah, take me to treatment. I'd like to accept that offer. It's just not going to happen. They need some semblance of mental clarity before they can make that decision on their own. What a stupid, ridiculous, insane state of things. It's unbelievable. We continue to elect the same people. I don't know what to do about it. I mean, except talk about it and hope that people wake up one day. All right, we're going to get to some national news coming up next. What's with all the hate about the Constitution? It's really starting to freak me out. First, if you're thinking about selling your home this year, we're waiting to see what the Fed cutting rates is going to do to the housing market. But Mike and I just drove into our neighborhood the other day and we're like, there's like over the weekend signs popping up. I couldn't believe it. It was like none and it was like 5. So I don't know. I think that people were waiting for that. There's going to be more homes on the market. So you want to make sure that you have a real estate agent who's really going to help your home stand out, especially as listings start to increase. And you've got to check out Wes Jones. This is what his team specializes in, making sure they have an awesome marketing strategy, making sure that your listing really shines for home buyers. That was the case for Sharona Rhodes and her husband. When they went to sell their house, she said Wes and his team just staged it beautifully.
So now it's, okay, the house is empty and you're seeing all the things that you've never really noticed. Like, oh my goodness, there's a broken baseboard over there. Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness, that looks terrible. And he's like, calm down, staging will take care of it. Just don't worry about it. They came in and they staged everything. And my 17-year-old daughter just graduated high school. So we went in to look at the house after the stage and she said, Mom, I would buy this house. You've always hated our house. She said, this house is aesthetic. I love this house. Like, okay, 17-year-old child.
And certainly staging is only part of the equation, and the proof is in the pudding, as we were saying last week. But Wes was able to, with the staging and other services that they offered Sharona and her husband in the home selling process, they were able to get that home sold in 6 days for over list price. So check out Wes Jones, sellwithwes.com, sellwithwes.com, a better way to sell your home. All right, I'm like freaking out over this. I think, in Washington State, we had Democrats who say if they get a supermajority, they're going to clean up the state constitution, which is a terrifying prospect. If you're a Democrat, even if you're a progressive, whatever you are, does it not freak you out to have one political party so in control of things that they could clean up the state constitution? I don't know how to I don't even want politicians I agree with to be so in control of things that they could clean up the state constitution. It's wild to me. So we've been talking about on the show, there's this increasing push from the national media to revisit the Constitution. And of course, because they don't like the makeup of the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court is the ultimate law of the land when it comes to interpreting the Constitution and what it means and what protections it provides. Just the latest example, the New Yorker had this long article. You can go read it if you want to. I'm not going to read it to you. It says, the headline, "Is it time to torch the Constitution?" Some scholars say that it's to blame for our political dysfunction and that we need to start over. And look, and they go in there, and I think there's some valid points in the article about the tyranny of the majority and having it does allow for a situation or a system where one party reaches such majorities that it's sort of a tyranny over the minority. But can you imagine the people who are in power right now being the ones to start over, to start our system over? Who would we trust to do that? And look, I also always point out on the show, because there's always these the Constitution, this, the First Amendment, this, the Second Amendment, all this. There is a process to change the Constitution. Just no one wants to embark on it. There is seemingly no desire to recognize or embark on the process of altering the Constitution if you think it is so deeply flawed, and if a majority of Americans believe it is so deeply flawed. And isn't that the way you should go about it? You don't torch it, right? And who would decide to torch it? Who would rewrite it? Joe Biden? Kamala Harris? I mean, frankly, Donald Trump? Who wants any of them? To do the founding fathers, when you think of really their brilliance in the Constitution, it has served us very well up to this point. Are there issues with it sometimes? Sure. Are there different interpretations of it sometimes, depending on the makeup of the U.S. Supreme Court? Sure, but they anticipated that, right? So it always comes down to whenever someone has an issue with one of the amendments to the Constitution, they want to talk about reframing it, re-examining it, or torching it, as the New Yorker does, you always have to think about, okay, who would make that decision? Is it a politician I agree with? Or are they politicians I don't agree with? And just one of the many exhibits, you can call it exhibit number 9,654, as to why I just don't trust this current political and ruling class to make any changes to the Constitution, is John Kerry. You've probably seen this clip by now at the World Economic Forum talking about the First Amendment.
Look, if people go to only one source and the source they go to is sick and, has an agenda and they're putting out disinformation, our First Amendment stands as a major block to the ability to be able to just, hammer it out of existence. So what we need is to win the ground, win the right to govern by hopefully having, winning enough votes that you're free to be able to implement change.
Yeah, the First Amendment stands as a barrier to hammer out of existence speech John Kerry doesn't like. You want John Kerry and the who's who at the World Economic Forum determining what speech is just and allowed? It's really scary stuff, and I'm starting to think they kind of mean it. And that this is the next frontier for the ruling class and the ruling party, is to, as the New Yorker says, torch the Constitution. Like, what would stop them if they were in complete control? So I don't know. They talk as much as they talk about Donald Trump being a threat to democracy, and then they repeatedly and routinely talk about doing away with amendments to the Constitution or torching the Constitution altogether. I find it really hard to believe them when they talk about Donald Trump being a threat to our very existence as a country. So that's the next, and in Washington State too, that is the next horizon for national politics. A real earnest effort to do away with protections in the Constitution. And that is absolutely in the next few months, if Democrats reach a supermajority in the Washington State Senate and then soon perhaps the State House, what they're going to try to do to the Constitution. Remember, they're going to get rid of the people's right to initiative and referendum. They're going to change the Constitution so that they can pass whatever income tax they'd like. They're going to gaslight voters into believing it's the right thing to do. It's all just very, very scary stuff. Okay, we'll get to questions and comments coming up next. First, Zach Abraham and his team at Bulwark Capital, let me know if you attended their latest Know Your Risk live webinar on Thursday. I know they'll be having another one coming up here soon. They try to do it like every month and a half or so, and especially right now around the election. I know you have a lot of questions about how world events, national events could impact your retirement portfolio, and Zach and his team absolutely specialize in managing risk. And he's just fun to have on the show. We were talking about last week. He really lost it last week, didn't he? Nancy Pelosi's husband, like selling off all this Visa stock before an investigation was announced by the feds into Visa. Zach was not very undivided about it.
The most disgusting part of it is that they didn't break any laws.
Isn't that insider trading, though?
It is, but insider trading does not apply to congressional people. It does not apply to congressional members on information that they have gotten from official business. It is absolutely insider trading, but it's rules for thee and not for me. Somebody bought that stock from him not knowing what he knew, right? That should be fraudulent inducement. The whole thing is just preposterous, and that's why I was saying I cannot believe that this election is even close. The whole apparatus of this government is rotten from the inside out. The problem is you just have no character. These people are just characterless. They're just garbage. They're trash human beings.
You know, we love Zach. He just tells it like it is. And when it comes to protecting your retirement and the risks associated with it, he's going to tell it like it is to you too. So you can learn about Bulwark Capital's risk management strategy and their free common sense investing guide. Get yours now by going to knowyourriskradio.com. That's knowyourriskradio.com. All right, questions, comments on transgender inmates. Slow no-mo. I need a new kidney. Do I need to commit a crime? Actually, probably. Like, they'd put you right up to the top of the waiting list, you know? The more violent the crime, the better. Captain Cranky Pants. So this crap is what they really want CCA money for. Yeah. Don't complain to me about, have you seen some of the dishonest ads, Nicole, with the CCA?
Oh, yes.
They are ratcheting it up.
Get tense every time I see it. I get so angry.
They're going back to that old lie about, there's this one with a pothole. They hit a big pothole. And it's like, they're going back to the old lie that Senator Marco Lias rolled out, that if we get rid of the CCA, we will not be able to afford to fix our roads and bridges, which, of course, that's totally separate money. The CCA money isn't spent on that. So it's got like, people stuck in traffic. it has a snail, and it's like, oh, the snail will beat you if it has nothing to do with it, right? And then the pothole, nothing to do with it. Right. It's so deeply dishonest.
And again, it's all, I mean, all of that, like money spending, the thing that we won't get maybe is the $200 credit because you'll get to keep that money to begin with.
You'll have even more. You'll have 600.
Right. And all of those programs that we're not really sure what they do might not get funded. But as far as everything else, it's all about money management and how they were spending money before, because obviously potholes kind of got fixed before. I mean, they still don't really get fixed all the time, but it's just about money management, money managing, not funding it.
Well, and that's why I point out some of the things in the show today. Like, let's stop funding suicide kits for drug users. Let's stop funding transgender surgeries for prison inmates. Let's stop spending a dime on any sort of DEI initiative at any level of state government or in schools. And I'll tell you what, I could probably find you $100 million today if you give me the budget of things you just put a big fat red line through that taxpayers should not be paying for, and we can spend on other things. I could find you more than that, but you need to give me like a solid week. There is so much waste in government, utter waste. Really, the entire homeless industrial complex, where it just gets worse. So why are we spending, billions of dollars on these things that clearly aren't working? Governor Inslee's right-of-way initiative. It's like $500,000 to $1 million per person to get them out of homelessness when Governor Inslee clears them from along a state highway. It's like, you tell me you can't do it for less? And then you want to complain like, oh, but if you take the CCA money away by voting yes in November, then we won't have money to give bus tickets to kids. You're telling me, make this choice. Let's make this decision. You can either give, cost is essentially the same, right? You can either give transgender surgeries to inmates, or you can spend that money on bus tickets for kids. Which is it? Make the decision, right?
Yeah.
You don't need a CCA. Surgeries for transgender inmates, bus tickets for kids. I'll tell you what, I choose bus tickets for kids. They're not free, by the way. It's taxpayer bus tickets. I'm sure there's a lot of people who choose bus tickets for kids. You want to pay for the electrification of those ferries? All right, let's cut every DEI program, every DEI department, every DEI initiative, every DEI position. We'll get those ferries electrified just fine. It's ridiculous. It's all about priorities.
This weekend, they also announced that they're raising the rates for the ferries. I'm like, wait a minute. The ferries are questionable. Like, you can't rely on them to
Don't
run,
even work.
But you're going to raise the price.
Oh, they'll make it better, though. More money. That's
money,
always
more
the solution, right? We have no cops. Bob Ferguson says more money. Throw money at them. Like they're strippers or something. Stripper analogy. Homelessness is getting worse. $4 billion for affordable housing. Let's throw money at it.
Well, the reason they probably need more ferry money is because they don't actually run. So then those people aren't paying. And then you have to it's obscene.
It's obscene. It's mental. Why anyone, can I just say really quick? So we're going to have some opportunities coming. Why am I saying like that? Why am I sounding like East Coast? Opportunities. Anyway, we're going to have some opportunities in the coming days. We're going to try to put together an army of volunteers to try to get Dave Reichert and these initiatives across the finish line. So I want you to be on the lookout for these opportunities. But also, we need to put out a simple 5-point checklist for every single one of you and every single person who watches and listens to the show about what we absolutely each need to do before Election Day. Like, as simple as make sure you're registered to vote. The second one, call 5 friends. Family members, neighbors. Call 5 people to make sure they know the truth about the initiatives and make the pitch for why they cannot continue to support the party that's in power. Like, we're going to put together a 5-point checklist.
Make sure they know.
Everybody can just do it. And then honestly, but think about that. If every single one of you talks to 5 people and you tell them, go talk to 5 people, I know that sounds Pollyannish or whatever it is, but we're talking about the difference, probably like 100,000, 150,000 votes is the difference between like Dave Reichert being governor or Bob Ferguson being governor, is the difference between some of these initiatives passing or not passing. We can make that up like this. We get like 3 times that many people on social media. We just need people to be informed, to be engaged, and to take proactive steps to try to make a difference. It's not enough to just vote yourself. I'm sorry. Too much is at stake. It's easy to make a phone call. Hell, if you don't like making phone calls, I'm a millennial. I'll send a text. Send a text like, hey, don't vote for Bob Ferguson or I'll never speak to you. If you vote for Bob Ferguson, you're not invited to Thanksgiving. That's fine. If you vote for Bob Ferguson, if you vote against the initiatives, you're not invited to Christmas this year. So we're going to put that together. I'll put it together.
Okay.
Okay, great.
I'll support it.
I think I need some. I only had 2 in my mind, so I need you to help me.
Oh, okay.
So, all right. On the drug kits, Janine Peterson, ignorance is bliss, they say. Our leaders just want to either bury heads or push the needles. They can't have it both ways. On the Olympia School District, Matthew Cook, decades ago, this was fringe in academia. Now it's all over public schools. It always begins in academia, and believers go into teaching. It's no accident. Mo Sterling, they're basically teaching narcissism with these identity things. Kind of like, I mean, I get it. It's like, I understand how it's narcissism. It's like, it's teaching you that you're like the center of the universe.
All about you. It's all about you.
They are teaching, what is the word for that? Main character syndrome. Mm-hmm. That's very much, we have a main character syndrome problem where it is all about you and you must call me MX.
And again, it's being taught. Yep. It's being taught to these kids.
Matt Gilbert, $5 super chat, so I have to read it. It's pumpkin spice Narcan season. I'm not drinking any pumpkin spice lattes this week. Okay. I had too many last week. They're too expensive. It's just stupid. It's really dumb.
I know. We can make our own.
I made my own shots in here. I just need to stop behind. Look, I went to this place on Cap Hill. I had I won't name drop them, but I had coffee late last week with just a really awesome person who's trying to help with the initiatives. And I go in and I know the barista recognized me, and like not in a good way. I kind of see there was the chick barista and then a man, and I knew he recognized me. So I was like, I went up and I was like, I want a pumpkin spice latte. I said, because I'm a basic B. And she was like laughing. She thought it was so funny. And I'm like, that's just who I am. That's who I want to be, you know? And the guy was looking at me like sneering. He said, like, get out of my coffee shop. He didn't say that, but anyway,
keep an eye on
too many pumpkin spice lattes. Baron of Gray Matter, $5 super chat. It is abuse to leave people on the street suffering in their addiction and mental illness. Unaliving. This is pure evil. Arrest, evaluation, treatment, mental or detox. Egomorph 2, my late mother used to always say, you can't lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink, but sure can make it blow bubbles. I don't get it.
I think that's for the drugs. Like you can give them help, but you can't make them take it.
Oh, yeah.
But we need to make them take it.
We need to either make them take it or throw them in jail. Right. Because then they can get to a point of mental clarity where they can make a decision about, do I continue to do these things or not? All right. Where are we at in the show? Oh, thanks, Nicole. Closing sanity check, another Bob Ferguson lie. Go figure. All right, Bob Ferguson outspending Dave Reichert like 100 to 1. And people are always like, oh, you know, one of my things that's driving me nuts, honestly, and this might apply to some of you, I love you, but if one more person types, why am I not seeing or Dave Reichert ads? Why am I not seeing ads for the initiatives? Have you donated any money? Like, they can't put him on TV without money. And the reality is Bob Ferguson had this massive war chest. Democrats have way more money than Republican candidates, and they're just not bringing the amount of money they need in to be able to run TV ads. So that is always going to be my response to anyone who says, why haven't I seen any ads for Dave Reichert or the initiatives? I'm going to say, you can give him $1. Give him $5 if you've got it. And some people don't, that's fine. But what other ways can you help and spread the word on social media or whatever it is? Anyway, Bob Ferguson, though, he's got all the money in the world, and he has so much money that he asked his brother to be in a campaign ad for him. Here's part of it.
And Bob will eliminate 4-year degree requirements for most state jobs, opening doors to more good-paying careers. I would support Bob Ferguson, even if he wasn't my kid brother, but it helps he listens to old machinists like me.
Bob Ferguson for governor.
Yeah. Bob's campaign saying, Bob, we got so much money. Does your brother want to be in an ad just for fun? But the takeaway from that, where he says, and this is all over TV right now, I'm going to eliminate 4-year degree requirements for most state jobs, which honestly, I hear them like, that's a great idea. That is that's a great idea. But I swear I heard, oh, that's right, it's already the law. And it was a law championed by Republicans that got bipartisan support. House Bill 2216 passed in the 2024 legislative session, became law on June 6th of this year, an act relating to reducing barriers to state employment by eliminating 2-year and 4-year degree requirements that are unnecessary. It passed in the House 96 to 1, passed in the Senate 49 to 0. The governor signed it. March 13th. It went into effect June 6, 2024, yet Bob Ferguson either doesn't care and is so committed to lying and making himself sound like he is just the epitome of a smart, moderate candidate, or he really didn't do the research to realize that that was already the law in Washington state. Not a surprise. That has been your sanity check for today. That has been today's episode of Undivided. Thank you for being here. Thank you so much for your commitment to giving common sense a comeback. We appreciate every single one of you. If you have not signed up to support our show already, please do so. Look, I know it's a free show during the week. We love having you here, but we would also love your support to continue to grow. undividedpod.com. You can sign up. It's just $5 a month. Like $55 a year because we give you 2 months for free when you sign up for a year. What a deal is that? That's like 4 pumpkin spice lattes, honestly, because some of them are like $9 depending on where you get them. It's ridiculous. undividedpod.com, undividedpod.com. We'll see you back here on the live show tomorrow at noon.